Welcome to another episode of the Career Revolution podcast, where big ideas for careers start small and it's never too late to get started. I'm your host, Licia Dewing, and I'm a career strategist. I believe that we can create careers that we love and that we can find our calling. What it takes is the right mindset and aligned action steps to career strategize ourselves back to our purpose. Today, we have a special guest joining us in studio, Melvi Todd, who's come all the way from being a nerdy scientist formulating health products in the lab to discovering her true calling, empowering organizations to unlock their innovative potential. And before we dive into that episode and I bring Melvi on stage, I'd like to remind our listeners to please share and subscribe and share the episode and leave a review if you enjoy what you hear. Also, stay till the end because Melvi will be sharing her very own unique, special, revolutionary tip with you. Now, let's get started and welcome Melvi. Welcome.
Hi, Licia. Thank you for the invitation. It's lovely to be here.
It's such a pleasure, and I'm so excited to have you here. I've been thinking about this conversation for a long time now. It's good to get it off the ground. I want to kick off by inviting you to share about your journey, how you arrived at where you are now, which is your current calling.
Well, I think one day I was sitting thinking about what it is that I'd really like to do in life. And it came down to, I want to make things better, which led me to think about an elixir, much like a magic potion. You don't really know exactly what goes in there, but, depending on the unique challenges faced, you throw in a unique blend of ingredients, and then this thing kind of solves your problems. So, of course, my business name, Elyxer Consulting, is based off of that. But I just changed the I, or substituted the I for a Y, because I think the why is also something that drives me and is very important to me. So why does my business exist? I see myself as a catalyst for business evolution, the change that needs to happen. And I've also incorporated a lot of elements into my logo that symbolizes. There's, a tree for knowledge. There's a heart for putting heart and having love and care for people that you work with, an infinity symbol for never stopping giving your energy, never stop being open to change, and then also the fern leaves, which are representative of growth. So, and I actually had that logo designed by a tattoo artist for me.
Very wise move. Now, I introduced you as the nerdy scientist who's now helping organizations innovate and find their purpose. Tell us about some of these kind of turning points in your career, the sort of specific moments or sort of aha moments that you evolved through to get to where you are now.
Absolutely. I think there were probably quite a few, but some that stand out for me. I mean, I started my career in sort of innovation, research and development, doing research, designing new stuff that was obviously relevant to market trends and customer needs and all the rest. And I evolved from different industries. You mentioned sort of health foods and supplements. I worked in liquor products. I worked for sort of consumer products. And in many of those jobs, we were always looking at trends, developing new and exciting things. But then I had a career move where, there was a super great innovation role sold to me about how we're going to be, changing things and bringing new things to market. But then when I actually started there, the brief was, no, actually, we just want to sweat the assets. We want to save cash. We actually just want to sell this place for 5x or 7x. So it's not really about innovation. It's, cost cutting, etc. And I think I just found that so frustrating because, one, I felt that I could bring so much more to the table. And second of all, I think that relentless cost cutting, it does destroy products. It can even destroy your brand if taken too far. It definitely demotivates your staff when you're in this permanent cost cutting state of mind. It's not coming from an abundance perspective. And then what I find is that it generally ends up being this race to the bottom. Now, of course, I'm not talking about sort of blatant waste. Of course, one shouldn't do that. That's not good for the business. It's not good for the customer. Nobody wants to pay for waste. but you can't save yourself rich. So for me, I think it's really all about innovating, taking some risks, trying new things, and persevering. So yeah, when it just got to, you know, another round of cost saving, I said to myself, no, something needs to change. This is not how I bring my best self to, you know, this world every day.
So what was that specific aha moment that you realized something needs to change and you were heading into a different, you know, you were heading into this entrepreneurial space and place? What was that?
I think it was, in addition to what I just mentioned, I think, you know, when I woke up in the mornings and I just couldn't get myself out of bed. I mean, I'm a highly motivated, energetic individual. And when I found myself the alarm going off, and no matter how much I slept, I just, you know, I couldn't, it felt like I wasn't looking forward to the day or the week or anything in particular. And I mean, I've created some pretty cool products along with my colleagues in different organizations. So I think that was for me, and my husband looked at me as like, you can't keep doing this. So, you know, that was really the start of it. And yeah, Elyxer had actually already been born in my mind, and my company registered in 2016 already. So I think that was the ultimate thing where I just said, you know, at this age, I can't be, you know, doing this for the next 30 or 40 years of my life, dragging myself out of bed. And then, yeah, no, I think that was the penultimate thing that got me there.
And I know that you've had some sort of significant mentors and people who've influenced your work along the way. You've continued to study, you've completed your PhD, you've done an incredible amount of growing within your mind. So not specifically in that regard, but in your experience of working with people through Elyxer or through your sort of previous career, was there any mentorship or influence that came to you out of your relationships with the people that you've worked with?
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think on reflecting on this, I've actually had so many mentors, not really official mentors, but I think in every interaction with another human, there is a mentorship opportunity or an opportunity for you to learn something. But I think the one that stands out for me is actually from my first job at Vital Health Foods. So it wasn't an official mentorship, but Vital did have this program where, you know, talented performers in the organization would once a year have a chat to the HR director. And I remember, I think it was sort of my second year at the company or so, went for one of these chats at the beginning of the year. And there was really two things that he said that really made an impression on me to this day. And the first one was, he told me the story about how every year he and his family, they sit down and they would all set their goals. Even, you know, the kids at school. His son wanted to be in the first cricket team. Was like, okay, if that's your goal, how are you going to get there? You know, are you going to exercise differently, eat differently? What are all these sort of things that you're going to put in place to reach that goal? And I thought, wow, that was pretty cool. You know, I actually would like to do that with my family one day. And then I think the second thing that he said to me, he actually shared a quote by the Chinese Taoist philosopher Lao Tzu. The quote says, when the best leader's work is done, the people say, we did it ourselves. And I think that really set the bar for me in terms of how I want to interact in the world. I consider myself to be someone that shares my knowledge willingly, and I always try to do the right thing. And as far as possible, I love empowering people. So, you know, it's not for me about the titles or getting the credit or anything, but when you see people going off and, you know, they've learned from interactions and, you know, you can see the pride building in themselves. I don't know, it's difficult to put a name to that feeling that you really get.
Tell us about the obstacles that you faced, if any. What obstacles did you face, and how did they shape your evolutions throughout your career?
Yeah, definitely. Well, you know, I'm not sure where one would begin and end with that, but I think one of probably the most significant ones for me, and I'm thinking about entrepreneurial journey, and certainly I don't think there's an entrepreneur walking on this planet that hasn't faced obstacles. But the decision to go full time into my own business was in 2019. And of course, 2020, COVID hits. So I was pretty much like one moment, woo, celebrating 1 year of being like working for myself. And then the next minute we were like locked down into, into our houses and, trying to like refigure out life. But I think something that stood out for me from that experience, though, is that no matter the obstacles, I can definitely say I had bulletproof personal support in terms of my family and friends, and even, the people that I've worked with in the past who also hired me for various jobs, consulting work in their firms or firms that they later on moved on to. So, I think the obstacles will always be there. I think that hopefully if you've built up a good network, they shouldn't be insurmountable. But I think an important part there is, though, that it's also important to pay it forward. Nobody likes a taker, and Adam Grant talks about givers and takers, and I think that is also really important. In the entrepreneurial space, I think there's a lot of sharing, within the right network. So you need to find your space of supportive, caring humans, and that will definitely make all the difference, in my opinion.
And hearing you speak and knowing you as I do, there's been some risk taking. I mean, as you said, an obstacle was COVID, but despite that, you went out into your own business. So can you talk a little bit more specifically about where in your career did you lean into some risk? And how did that turn out? What sort of happened in the risk space for you?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. If I think of risk, then I always think of my sister and I watched The Lion King way too many times. But in the movie, Simba says, I laugh in the face of danger, ha 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 ha. But I think someone like myself, since I've been a child, I've been, fallen out of hospital beds, had some head injuries. I was always the girl climbing trees, tearing my dresses, etc. So, I'm not a lunatic, but I've definitely had one or two moments as well where I was like, wow, Melvi, that could have ended very differently. So, I think in terms of my career, the risks would definitely have been, as I said, as you mentioned as well, I started out as the nerdy scientist. So all things remaining the same, I would have probably just stayed in that scientific direction. But also thanks to some advice from one of my sort of unofficial mentors, I realized, and I do, and I always have had a real love for interacting with people and connecting with people. And I think that for me was an airtime part of my life that didn't really get airtime. And then after doing the MBA, I kind of started transitioning my career more to something that is more working, with challenges in businesses. And of course, at the bottom of that, it's all people. So I feel like, all things considered, it was a fairly risky move. People don't, I think, typically look at someone who started out life as a scientist and then think that you can be necessarily a strategy consultant and leading teams. And again, it's really about bringing out the greatnesses that really is in those teams. So it's about facilitation and so on. And I think it's been a journey developing that skill set, and there's been some serendipitous things that happened. Being an entrepreneur, there's some bootstrapping. For me, that looked like also doing some teaching, some executive education, which I've thoroughly enjoyed. I always learn so much from the students. It's really helped me as well, fine-tuning my moments of interaction with people. But I think, overall, if someone had to look and hire me straight out, they'll look at my CV and it'll look like a chameleon in a smarty box, changing all sorts of colors. But I think, we're in the past, and, there's so many people that talk about it, is, maybe you just, and again, there's a space for specialists and so on. But I think we're living in the kind of world where things are just so dynamic and so fast changing. I don't think it's going to be seen as a negative where you try lots of things. And, it's part of the process of figuring yourself out and getting to that point of doing something that makes your heart sing.
Absolutely. And I think along the way, love the chameleon and the smarty box, is that you lean into more of the things that you love doing, that you do so well, and you do those better. So whatever the external circumstances are, that it might, like on paper, look like chopping and changing, but you are still doing the same thing that you've done. You're just the how that you do it is just interpreted in different scenarios and different situations. So in a way, it's about defining how you work and defining that level of success. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how your definition of success has evolved from employee and to sort of entrepreneurial mindset, and in that sort of business to business space of working within organizations, working with clients too. So what are your thoughts there in terms of the evolution over time and the metrics, perhaps, you use to measure your own success?
No, for sure. I mean, if I look back over my career, certainly that's something that's changed very dramatically. I'm the first to admit at the beginning of my career, it was, important how much money you're making and what your title looked like and what sort of experience you were getting. And I think, part of that money titles period started when I got married for the first time. You need to buy a house, you try to pay it off as fast as possible. Then you get divorced and you leave your house and your stuff and your furniture and everything behind. And then you say, oh, well, money and stuff, that's not necessarily the recipe for success. Granted, there's, minimum requirements. And then I think after that, there was the experiences period where I traveled internationally a lot, met lots of people, absolutely loved it, still do, still have friends all around the world. And, there's a big part of me that's also still very much about, in all the work that you do, in all your interactions, what can you gain and give in these experiences? And I think the more open you are to, different forms of rewards, sometimes you could take on something that's not necessarily paying the most, but you get such great exposure, you learn something about yourself, you put sort of new ways of doing things into place. So I think for me, if I had to say, the biggest change then has really been fully acknowledging, I think, what was always there all along, and that was kind of this growth mindset. And that is, whatever you're doing, as long as you're learning and you're growing, then you are succeeding. Because, and I get a lot of inspiration from nature, as you can see from my background as well. And I think in nature, everything is growing. And if it's not growing, it's dead, right? Or, you've got your bulbs and things that will like maybe go and hibernate for, the winter or whatever. But in generally, things are growing, pushing out roots and sprouts and all of that. So I think for me, the ultimate definition of success, or that I feel if I'm winning at life, is when I can see growth in one way or another. And the interesting thing is, people also talk about growth very as if it's always positive sometimes, like, growth is, yes, you're always gaining more skills. Sometimes it's something like an embarrassing situation that happens to you that makes you realize, wow, next time I need to do that differently. It can sometimes also be painful. But anything that lets you then reflect and say, okay, how do I go forward from here? So I think that's for me. And again, one last thing, if I think about now in my consulting work, I think when I interact with my clients and, they tell me things like, I can really see the change in my team since you've been working with them. That sort of thing makes me feel really good. You can't put a price on that.
And what along the way, in light of the growth that you've been on and your continued growth, what unexpected or unconventional skills have you picked up along the way that have actually turned out to be really useful? Something surprising that you didn't think you needed, and now you have it. Is there anything there?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure if it's a skill or something, but I think learning to zone into what's needed. And sometimes that what's needed can be a little bit unconventional. So I think of, for example, one of my clients that I'm working with now, it's a family-owned business. They're super responsive to change. When the CEO says jump, everybody's like, how high? Literally in unison, you hear that happening. And of course, now it's the part of the year where we're kind of running out of time and everybody's freaking out. And, I do need responses from the team to also do my work and prep for my sessions. So there's sort of radio silence on the front. So I'm saying to my friend, I know what the challenge is here. The challenge is actually, the CEO that says innovation is really important to him, but then he's sending his people off in all sorts of directions doing other things. So I said to her, like, I actually need to, in a sort of polite way, inform him that, this is what needs to happen. And I'm going to message him. My friend's like, no, you can't do that. You can't say that. I'm like, but I am. And I did. So I'm like, dear CEO on WhatsApp, Nohal. I said, I cannot help you if half of your team do not reply to me. I said, I understand that everyone is busy, but to my own admission, someone pointed out to me on Friday, and this really happened to me last Friday, that there's actually always time for the things that are a priority for you, or the things that you value. So I said, you vote with your time what's important. So that's what I wrote. I didn't say anything else. I didn't get any response to that message, but the very next day I got 3 emails from the team members that I needed feedback from. So I know something happened, and I know the message at home. So I think that's an interesting space for me in the consulting is, we all people, we all, have lots of divided priorities and everything, but sometimes we also need to be called to account to be like, hey, there is a little bit of an agreement here, and we need to, if you say innovation is important, then you need to also, still make sure that then your team's time is first and foremost given to that. It can't be, no, sorry, I've got this burning platform, whatever. Those things may be, but so I think sometimes you need to find ways which could be more or less direct to have those conversations. And again, this is after working with this team for a year. So I wouldn't do that on day number 2 of working with a new client necessarily. But I think that's been interesting for me. And I guess what's underlying that is sort of when there's, my husband always says, trust the goodwill. So when the goodwill's been built up, and when there's, they can sense you're genuinely doing this because you do care. So there's that authenticity behind it. And that's been a difficult one because, you send that WhatsApp, and I was looking at it like a few times, like, should I delete it? Should I delete it? Seeing as I can delete it, should I delete it? So you need to find that, whatever it is, you are there for the reason that they employed you. In my case, it's around boosting innovation. So then you need to be able to, call it for what it is. And if you see things that are hurdles or obstacles, call them out. But it takes guts. So I don't think the nerdy scientists sort of 15 years ago would have been able to do that.
So in the context of your career evolution, is there one particular sort of misconception, industry-wide challenge or issue that you've come up against often that you would like to shift and change?
Wow, that's a good question. Industry misconceptions. Maybe since we're talking about innovation, I think one would be this thing about the overnight success. It's like we hear about Airbnb. It's like, whoa, this guy had an idea to put a blow-up mattress, and then he created a platform, and like, boom, it's this multi-billion-dollar business. I think when you go and read behind the scenes of all of these stories, and even sort of small and medium entrepreneurs, there's so much blood, sweat, and tears. And the successful product is iteration number 500. And what's interesting to me is, although we think, okay, yes, everybody actually knows this, and if you haven't actually tried it, then you have this sort of secondhand perception of, oh yeah, it's tough doing that, and it's not easy, but you kind of don't really have an idea of how not easy. And what's interesting for me, what I find is when people hire you as a consultant, they suddenly think that all the previous challenges of why it's difficult to get innovations to work is just going to magically disappear. But it's not. You've still got the people with their, KPIs, and what you're measuring is what you're managing. And so if you want them to do extra things, or, if you want suddenly there to be a step change in how your organization does things, you can't go there with the same thinking and the same processes that have been up to now clearly restrictive of that. So I think one needs to accept that when you want significant change, again, it's going to require energy, more energy than you think, and there are parts that can be painful. But when you get to the other side and you start reaping the rewards, you remember the ending. And that's the thing that they say about experiences, right? Is that at the end of the day, all those things about throughout the journey matter less when it ends well, because the ending is what people really remember. But the thing is also just to get to that ending. And so also, innovation and doing innovation well is also not unstructured and just like, boom, we have this idea and wow, it's perfect and it didn't require any planning and all that sort of thing. It's that thing about planning to fail is failing to plan. And I think it applies to, innovation as well. You need to put in the effort and the energy. And if you do, there will be a reward, but there are probably examples of when it's instantaneous, but I can't think of any right now.
What I so enjoy about listening to you, Melvi, is your ability to kind of articulate complex things. I mean, that's why you do what you do. That's why you take people through innovation. So I want to ask you, if you could create a new job title for what you do, like you needed to call yourself something other than what it is, what would it be and why? Something that would describe the essence of what you do. How would you capture the essence of your role in a new word?
Synergy Sage.
That sounds interesting. Go on.
I think, again, I can't really take credit for what comes out of innovation sessions, but because I ask usually for a diverse group of people at different levels in the organization with different skill sets, and I ask for the person that's the eternal optimist, and I ask for the person that is thinks it's doomsday all the time. And I like putting all these people in a room together and sort of depending on, the industry and those sort of things, have a bunch of thought-provoking ideas or concepts or videos. And then we start talking about it. And I think what I try to do is just create a safe space that nobody feels like they can't make a comment that, might have in another way or another part of the business or in a certain context of a certain meeting be stupid. So, like maybe an engineer suggesting something soft and fluffy. Again, that's a major, stereotype. But I think the idea is that, the experience, the knowledge, especially industry specific stuff is always there. A lot of the time, there's just people dynamics that means that it doesn't always get airtime. So for me, I really try and read the room and try and integrate where I can see people have strengths and good thinking. And it's and every single session is different. I can't say that I have a blueprint for, okay, this is what I go and do every single time with teams, because the people are different and the industry is different. So I think it's not so much about all my knowledge as it is about creating a space where people feel comfortable to maybe go a little crazy and imagine stuff that they think would be wild and ridiculous. And, then we have our short, medium, and longer term plans, and all those things go on there. And I think that in itself is also motivating, because it helps see people further than just the here and now and this year's budget or the next 3 years budgets. And I think when there's inspiration or something inspirational to look forward to, that's also great. I think everybody needs someone who loves them. They need something that they're good at, and they need something to look forward to. And I think that's true in business as well, because we spend so much of our time at work. I think most people want to be doing something cool at work and be doing something where they're getting a level of fulfillment and feeling like they're bringing, their talents to work. And so, I think if you just let people open up and go a little bit sometimes beyond their job roles, you'll be amazed to see what comes out. I think human beings are inherently very creative beings. I mean, look what we have accomplished as the human race. Yes, there's, climate change and all that stuff as well. But for the large part, the concepts, the things, if we can dream it, we can build it. And so I think, I sometimes say, when people ask me what I do, I say, sometimes it's just giving or helping with a little bit of inspiration. And sometimes it's really about, helping creating some structure and plan around how is it that we actually, where we going to go. But sometimes it really is just a little bit of inspiration and almost permission to dream.
Wonderful. Permission to dream. So as we start to wrap up from the Synergy Sage, I've asked you for your revolutionary tip, and we're going to get to that in a moment. But before we get there, what words of encouragement from your experience of your career revolutions can you share with those who'll be listening?
Well, I think if my own career journey is anything to go by, then all I want to say to like everybody out there is don't ever get stuck thinking, oh no, I made a wrong career move. I think all the experience adds up to the beautiful package that is you. And I think also I touched on it earlier, if you want to stay in the game, which is the super fast changing world, it's going to be necessary to reinvent yourself repeatedly. So you can almost think of it as an advantage if you've maybe put yourself in this position where you're like, ooh, maybe this was one step too far, and you kind of have to like figure out how you're going to put the stepping stones to get, you know, somewhere else. So yeah, I think the ability to rethink and reinvent yourself is going to be a competitive advantage in future. And, you know, I watched this really interesting, it was a video, and it's obviously an older video, but it was about Steve Jobs and spoke about in his childhood, he was given up for adoption. And then eventually the parents that adopted him had promised the mom that they were going to send him to university, which they did. And it was costing almost all their life savings. And he just realized, you know, he wasn't really made for the courses that he had enrolled in. And so he actually quit university. But then he was still hanging around on campus for a while. And in that time that he was hanging around on campus, he decided he is actually going to enroll for one or two courses that he's interested in. And one of those courses was a calligraphy course. And he basically says, you know, he never knew then, but the fact that he attended this calligraphy course in university unofficially is actually the reason then that the Apple computers had these beautiful fonts, because before then there was no additional fonts. And so obviously, you know, all computers have that now. So, you know, even Steve Jobs did a random calligraphy course somewhere along the line. And thanks to that, he brought beautiful fonts to computers, which we all use today. So yeah, just figure out, you know, or just if you ever feel there's something that's not wrong, realize it's probably going to be calligraphy to your computer somewhere in the future.
I love that. I love that story, and so many revolutionary tips there. But I want you to hit us with your specific one that you prepared today.
So my final revolutionary tip would be to tell your audience to go and watch Brené Brown's short video on empathy. The reason being is, again, coming from the sciences, there was nothing that, you know, spoke to sort of human interaction, soft skills, this kind of thing in my sciences degree. But what I learned on the job is, you know, and it's obviously been my entire career experience, is there is no job on the planet that doesn't involve working with other people in one way or another. And that's especially so for innovation, I think, because if you want to get the most creativity, the most out of people, then I think understanding them, their uniqueness that they bring, treating them with empathy can really be a game changer. I mean, I think it can be a game changer in your work life and your personal life. And I think those two are so interlinked. You know, if things are going horrible at home, it's going to be really difficult to perform at work. And if things are really, you know, challenging at work, it sometimes spills over to that sort of kick the dog syndrome when you get home and you're grumpy and all the rest. So, you know, I've found that, you know, whenever, instead of reacting to how people, oh, you know, this person was rude or whatever, it's like, yeah, you know what, maybe that person is having some issues somewhere or something is going on in their life, you know, instead of necessarily judging why their performance is down. And, you know, it can be difficult and it's not a natural place for everybody. And it's certainly taken me time to get into that place where I also, you know, first question, well, you know, if I was in this person's shoes, what could possibly be happening here? And I find that for me has been a game changer in terms of connecting with people, which has helped me immensely in both my personal life and my career life. And I think it's again that thing of we are all human. So treating each other more like humans is probably going to get you better interactions for whatever, you know, the reason is. And I think above all, you know, having good relationships, work and elsewhere, is probably one of the most, and I think there's actually that Harvard study about, it's been going for 70 or 80 years now. They say the happiest people, those that have solid relationships. And I think part of that is certainly going to be empathy. So for me, I think that's been one of the most enlightening things in my life and career.
Thank you, Melvi. Thank you for spending this time with us. Thank you for sharing from your heart and your experiences and opening us up and telling us where you've come from and the trees that you've climbed. Thank you for sharing the highs and the lows too. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here on the Career Revolution podcast. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And to everyone listening, please, if you enjoyed this, subscribe to the episodes. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, imagine what you could do if you did something about all the things that you imagine. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.